everyone. Welcome to What Do You Believe? I'm happy and excited to have Martin and Dr. Shreya here with us, and Dr. Nagy. Dr. Nagy is a medical doctor, and he practiced surgery for 25 years. He's the fellow of the Royal College of Surgeons of England. We're happy that you're here, and we were talking about the intermediates, where
Yes,
they're like apes and then human, and then was there something in the middle?
exactly. And they are trying to hammer us with information saying we came from apes and there are intermediates, and they try to prove that. And let me show you this little clip uh, explaining who we are according to Attenborough.
I'm going to take you on a journey to discover who you really are and where you came from. But you're not just going to sit there listening to me. You're going to be part of the experience, and you'll be able to examine some of the evidence for evolution along the way.
If you have a look at your screens now, you can rotate the modern human skull, and you'll see the domed forehead, the small face, the small front teeth, and on the lower jaw, a chin.
If you keep looking through your screen, you will see Australopithecus afarensis, an extinct hominid who lived about 3 million years ago.
Deep sea anglers live at a depth in the ocean below 1,000 meters where there's no light, so they're living in total darkness.
It was our fishy ancestors that first developed some of our most fundamental features: our skeleton, jaws, and 4 limbs.
Hold up your screen and look through it one last time. You'll see the tree that represents all of life, past and present. We started this film with a question: who do you think you are? And we can end it with an answer. You are, undoubtedly, like every other living thing on Earth, a member of one single family of life, descended from a common ancestor living thousands of millions of years ago.
So Sir David Attenborough wants us to believe that because the fish started to develop a spinal cord, and because they have this spine and they came out from Earth, that's the development that ended up by being us as the top of the human tree. He speaks about with authority saying, undoubtedly you are like this, and there is no evidence at all, and there is no science behind it. It's all assumptions, and we'll discuss these assumptions and discuss them in detail. So the evolution tree believes that there was a proconsul, that's the bottom of the picture that we see on the screen here, and then this branched into Ramapithecus, and then Organotan, that's at the top, and then from the same stem, Australopithecus afarensis came in, and branch of it became the chimpanzees and gorilla, and the other started to develop Homo habilis and Homo sapiens and Neanderthal, and then the Homo sapiens came at the top. That's what they believe. That's very simplified, obviously. Creation model speaks differently about all of this. It speaks about orangutan and Ramapithecus are one group of the family. That's one kind. Chimpanzees and gorilla and another type. Australopithecus are group of apes. And then the humans, Neanderthal and Homo erectus and Homo sapiens are one group of people. So we have different understanding altogether of the family tree of humans. Let us start by studying Australopithecus afarensis, which is called Lucy, and this is the most well-known specimen that they consider as an intermediate. Let us see what they found. What they found is about 40% of the skeleton. So on the left-hand side of the screen on my computer, there are parts of the skull. It's not a full skull, and that's important. They found many ribs and part of the upper limb, and they did find some digits, but these digits were curved. It's not straight like ours. They didn't have a full hand. They found half of the pelvis. And in the pelvis, the little bone at the back is called sacrum, and the sacrum is more curved in the female compared to the male. So that's why they call her Lucy as a female specimen. And then they found part of the hip bone, not the full pelvis, and part of the femur, which is a very important bone in our lower limb, and part of the tibia, which is another bone below the knee. They didn't find a foot at all. So they found 40% of the skeleton and they imagined the rest. So the picture on my right-hand side on the computer here is the imagination of building up Lucy. Let us see how they display Lucy in the museums. So they notice the hands and the feet. They made the hand fully. They found some digits and they were curved like apes, but they made the digits as if it is straight like humans. They completed the skull with the little amount of bone that they had and put the eyes and the nose and all the other features and put even the hair and divided the hair from the middle to give us the impression of an intermediate between apes and humans. They made her to stand straight and they made her having feet, and they never found actually feet at all for Lucy. The truth is, it is a knuckle walker similar to bamboo and gorilla. So the truth of the specimen that we had is like a gorilla skeleton. And they try to imagine it is the intermediate. Let us see Lucy as we see her in the Creation Museum in Cincinnati. We display her as an ape. And this is how it should look like based on the amount of information that we have from the skeleton. But if you go to different museums, that's London Museum, Natural History Museum. If you go to St. Louis Zoo, you will find Lucy displayed as standing again, straight, which is a big development in the skeleton, really. And it's looking up as if she's able to think a little bit, and the arms are full, and the hand is full. We don't have at all skeleton evidence from that. I mean the fossil evidence of this. These are the different shapes that's given to Lucy, and then you go to Chicago, and you find Lucy presented like this. And again, standing, able to give impression of thinking, and the full foot is displayed, and we don't have at all fossil evidence of that. The BBC displayed Lucy, as we can see on the screen, in 2006, and giving the impression of an intermediate between human and between apes, with the size of the skull, the eyes, the nose structure, as I explained before. Let us meet Richard Leakey, who's one of the great paleontologists. He's not a Christian. And he was talking about Lucy. So let us see what he said. In 1981, he said, we can now say that the Australopithecines definitely walked upright. He's talking as a scientist, and he's confirming that Lucy, that's Australopithecus afarensis, stood and walked upright. He's very confident in 1981. In 1982, he was giving a lecture, and he said, we don't know whether Australopithecus walked upright. Nobody has yet found an associated skeleton with a skull, so he cannot make sure that it is standing straight. So in 1981, he say confidently she's standing right. In 1982, he is saying no, it is not standing right, because we don't have evidence of that. He was giving a presentation on the BBC, Royal Institute of Science. He said he made many mistakes when he presented on the BBC television series, The Making of Mankind. He said probably wrong in a number of crucial areas. So he gave a lecture to say Lucy is our intermediate, and then he regretted that or retracted that, saying he was probably wrong in a number of crucial areas. In particular, he now says man's oldest ancestor as being considerably younger than 15 to 20 million years old. So all these years are estimates. It is not pure science, it is assumptions. And building on these assumptions, it varies. Look, 15 to 20 million, the difference is 5 million. That's a big number. He plumbed for a television. Leakey says, the basis of paleontologists classifying fossil apes and humans is misleading. And he would like to see an entirely fresh episode of classification. So even they find skulls, they don't know how to classify them properly. And they are giving us the impression we found the intermediate. Yeah.
So if in an unbiased world, if someone were to look at that without any model as a view to go from, have people addressed it in that way? Like, I don't know how paleontologists go about deciphering how to classify things and how much evidence you need to confidently say what the skeleton, where it came from.
All this is based on assumptions. So they assume she is 4 million years or 15 to 20 million years of ancestors, and they start to picture what they find in this scheme of understanding. So no paleontologist will be completely neutral, none, because he's starting with an assumption. And he's trying to fit the facts to the assumption. And then after a few years, they discover it's not fitting. And they are honest enough to come back and say, no, this is wrong. And that's what we are facing now. And they will come to conclusion again, all the tree that they are imagining needs to be reclassified. So are we going to put our faith and trust in something which is changeable and not solid science, it's assumptions, or put our trust in God the Creator?
But in paleontology circles and stuff, it's well understood that, or is it just like one person?
No, they understand that's all assumptions, and they keep reviewing the tree all the time. Some are more convinced that it is true than others, but all of them are researching and keep changing all the time, yes.
But are like both stories are assumptions still, right? If we're saying that it was, standing or it was just fully ape, they're both assumptions, so we can't know for sure.
Right. We can know that the structure of the hip is not for standing. And we know that we don't have the fossils of the foot. And we know the structure of the knee is not a human knee, so it cannot stand. So we know all these things. So the conclusion of what we know, which is a 40%, is to imagine it as if it is an ape. But there is no evidence that it was standing, so it cannot be the intermediate between ape and man. That's all what we can say.
And I'm getting a question that basically is saying, why would they say otherwise? Like if they have 40%, if we have 40%, and we're looking at this, and we know from the hip, from the knee, that it probably can't stand, from the digits that it's apes, then why would that happen? Or
Yeah,
why? Because you're saying museums and I mean
All over
they're
the
like
world.
respected museums and
Oh, yeah.
like magazines and newspapers that we read, places
Yeah.
we go. So why would that happen?
Yeah, because they are starting from the assumption that she is intermediate. So they want to see all the characteristics of intermediate and exaggerate them. And the missing parts, they can just imagine them based on their assumption. So it is assumption and imagination which is making the whole story.
From our own perspective, with a bias that we
Yes.
can't really, I guess, get rid of. Without...
Depending on the starting point, yes. So they think she is intermediate, so they see all the characteristics of intermediate, and the missing parts, they just imagine it as intermediate and continue on the same vein.
Well, let's take a short break. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
Thank you for tuning in. If you have any questions or comments, or if you'd like a copy of this episode, please call 714-709-4300 or email us at info@alkarmatv.com. You can also visit our website at www.alkarmatv.com. Also, you can write to P.O. Box 3610, Seal Beach, California 90740.
Welcome back to What Do You Believe? Martin, you always have questions, and now you get to ask him.
So we were talking about a common ancestor, at least for apes and men, but there is a one common ancestor for all creatures, and did that ancestor had more genes than all of us, and that's how eventually the genes kind of decayed to each
Group of
species.
it, yeah.
And then is that even evidence? Is there any evidence of that, or any
Yeah.
kind of
Yeah.
similarities to
No,
that?
there is no evidence of that, definitely. But the thing is, in the evolution tree, it starts with one simple cell. And if you ask them where this simple cell came from, we had a clip from Richard Dawkins again, where life started. He said it must have started in another planet. He doesn't have experiment to prove it. And how it started in another planet, he said by Darwinian evolution. He doesn't have evidence to prove that either. So imagine a cell developed in another part of the universe, and there is no other part that's discovered to be suitable for life at the moment. But let us take the assumption that started there. This cell has to go in the wider space with all these X-rays that can kill it, but we'll assume it will survive. It has to come through all the layers of the atmosphere, the 4 layers, with different temperature, and the top layer is very, very cold. Imagine this cell will survive. It has to come passing all this atmosphere and then come implanted on Earth and form all the plants and all the animals and all humans. That's an imagination. That's not science at all. So on the tree of life, according to evolution, you start with a simple cell. And this is by mutation and natural selection gain information. And we discussed previously that gaining information needs a source of information. So they assume that natural selection and mutation will increase the information. And with the increase of information, you have these subdivisions and different families.
Well, before even the cell part, the textbook, like when I was TAing and stuff, it says that before DNA, there was RNA because it's less stable, and that could like react with itself and make things like that. So it's more of like a basic block before even the cell.
Yeah.
So I don't know what you think about those type of theories.
But even if you have all the DNA or RNA in the world, you cannot have a living cell. These are the packages of information. They carry information, and they degrade. The RNA is more unstable compared to the DNA. We all agree about that. But we cannot say that RNA is a precursor of DNA, because even if this series of reactions happened, have all the information, all the material together, it will not form a nucleus, a functioning nucleus, and a ribosome, and the mitochondria, and cytoplasm, and cell membrane controlling the ions of sodium outside and potassium inside. You don't have all of that.
Well, I think the claim is that it starts off very, very simple and then gradually gets more complex. So not even having a nucleus, just a cell.
But without a nucleus, the cell will not function.
But there's bacteria that don't have nucleus.
Yeah, but they are bacteria. They don't have higher functions like us. So in order to have higher function, you have to have more specification in the cell. You have to have all the organelles, you have to have the nucleus. You can't stay at the level of the bacteria who don't have a nucleus, and I agree there are some. You can't stay at that level and expect it to increase by natural selection and mutation, because we discovered that natural selection distributing power is not a creative power, and mutation brings us back.
But how would you explain, it's a little complicated, but if you have different compartments and this one compartment is DNA, there's this other compartment called mitochondria, and it has its own DNA.
Exactly.
Where would that come from? The theory is that it engulfed another organism and they symbiotically.
They must be very clever to engulf the right stuff to form the more complicated cell. There must be an intelligence doing that, because by chance they might engulf something wrong and the series will stop. So you can't explain it by chance and time and laws of nature. Cannot. Yeah, there is a different type of DNA in the mitochondria, definitely. But that's because we believe in creation. God created DNA with different function in different organelles in the cell to function. And that makes more sense than by chance they are engulfing some information from here and there and making a beautiful cell to function. And this cell, when it's function and divides, it has to replicate itself properly. And when it replicates itself properly, it has more functions, like developing a wing, like developing a leg, like developing an eye. From all this information, from where they got all this information? Do you expect all of that to happen by chance?
That's what they say.
I know, but we need to question them. I read this textbook about the RNA thing and no precursor of DNA. Yes, I read the stuff. But when I read it, I said, okay, if that's the precursor, how all this information came together? Did we just get some information from viruses and from bacteria, and this started to have more function and more complicated function to develop something like the liver, like the stomach, like the skin? That's too much faith in that.
Well, I think a counter argument could be, well, like you were saying, there's these two models, one of evolution or one is creationism.
Yes.
I know you mentioned God of the gaps. However, if you come from that perspective, scientists can always say, yeah, we don't really know now, but we will know in the future. But in creationists, they look at that and go, well, you're never going to be able to find anything more because there's nothing more for your claim to bolster your argument.
Yeah, I like to reverse that argument actually, because in the creation, because life is so complicated, we are discovering what God has done. Let me give you an example. Imagine if Martin built a big machine, a complicated machine, an aeroplane, right? And I'm going to discover how this aeroplane is working. As long as I'm keeping discovering, I am really praising Martin for his skill of building the aeroplane. The aeroplane is not replacing Martin. There is no competition between the designer and the design he has made. All what we do in science is to discover the complicated structure that life is made of. It is not replacing the designer who made it. Am I clear in the example? No.
No, I get that. I think a lot of people bring up the example of, say, Galileo and how certain things in the Bible, they thought, oh, well, the earth was the center of the universe, but because of the discovering through science, we know that is wrong. Therefore, how do you know that what you're saying is not going to change based on what we discover?
Exactly.
Even in the same mindset of what you're saying, to discover God's creation, what happens if that's what the evidence is pointing to?
Right. That's a great question. Actually, the problem in the Middle Ages, the church took the science of their day and believed in it. It's not the Bible who said we are in the center of universe, because we don't know if the universe has a border and if it has a center or not. So the Bible speaks about the earth as the place where God is concentrating his attention, and he created humans on earth. We are able to live on this atmosphere and all the adjustment on the earth. And the center of the earth as the center of attention of God. It is not the geographical center of the earth. The Bible never stated that. But the people took the astronomy of their age. They thought the world is static, the universe is static, it's not expanding. So they hold to the wrong science of the day, and they defended it under the church. But it wasn't the Bible. And that is a history lesson that we all need to learn, that we have to be careful what the Bible says and what other people said, and the church takes it as their belief. I believe in the Bible is not, I believe of what other people think of their own area or era of history. Yeah? So when we actually, because there is a designer, we have to do more science. Isaac Newton was a great believer in the Bible. And because he believes the Bible, he is able to do his science and discover what God has made. So, as I said in the little example, Martin as an engineer is not competing with his machine that he has made. When we discover more about the machine that he has made, we understand how clever Martin is. But it's not a competition between the designer and the design that he had made.
So a lot of people do think there is a conflict, and you're saying that there's not a conflict between religion and science.
Not at all, definitely not. Between the operational science, because we define science as operational science, we have no conflict with that. We have a conflict with the assumption science that try to reconstruct the past, and that is, you have two starting points, either materialistic, time and chance and laws of nature, or God created. But there is no conflict at all between the Bible and the operational science.
So, doctors, I didn't understand most of what you guys just said, but the bottom line, or the glaring question that we'll always have is, how can you explain all that complexity from the cell, from, you know, the human body, from
Yes.
everything that we didn't even get into, you know, astronomy and like, you know, all
Yes.
that stuff, from basically nothing. And that's always going to be the problem of,
Yes.
did it happen by chance over time, and can you explain that this way?
Exactly.
But we're saying so far that it's almost impossible.
Exactly, exactly. But I'd like to stress the fact that the the creationist scientists are doing more work to discover what God has made, and that's not to replace God. We are admiring what God has made and the rules that He put in His creation. So being a creationist is an incentive to do more research in the world that God has made, because He gave us the dominion, as we seen on the video before.
Oh, thank you, guys. Man does not simply exist, but always decides his existence, what his existence will be, what he will become in the next moment. So, who do you think you are, and what do you believe? Thank you for watching.